Kiev's allies agreed to exert pressure on Moscow, despite recent tensions between the US. President Donald Trump and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky. Kyiv has agreed in principle to a US-brokered 30-day unconditional ceasefire only if Moscow halts its attacks in eastern Ukraine. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has not, however, agreed to any truce, instead setting conditions that were beyond what was called for in the US agreement. Marco Rubio made the following remarks during an interview in Canada one day ahead of the call.
There has to be some level of concessions. What those concessions are remains to be seen. That'll have to be part of the negotiation. But it's not going to be helpful to enter into those negotiations making blanket statements that may give an excuse for one side or the other not to participate in it. So we'll have to get to that stage where these things are discussed, and ultimately both sides, whatever happens, both sides will have to agree to it. And that's true of any negotiation.
Back in Europe, and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says Western allies are making plans to support Ukraine if a ceasefire with Russia is agreed. Speaking after a virtual meeting with global leaders, including Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, Starmer said military chiefs would meet next week in the UK to finalise security measures. Although Russia has welcomed the proposal, it continues to demand Ukraine to drop its NATO aspirations and give up territory terms. Starmer stressed that pressure on Moscow would continue, with military aid flowing and economic restrictions tightening on Russia. While France and the UK have signalled they could send peacekeeping troops, Russia remains opposed to any Western troops in Ukraine. To the Middle East, and the first US strikes against Yemen's Houthis since President Donald Trump took office in January has killed at least 31 people, as per the Houthi Health Ministry. This comes after President Trump's post on social media vowing to use overwhelming lethal force against Houthis, citing the Houthis' threat against Red Sea shipping. Trump also warned Iran that it must immediately cut support to the Houthis. In reaction to this, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said that Washington has no authority or business to dictate its foreign policy, while he also urged the United States to stop the killing of the Yemeni people. The death toll has risen to 16 in Syria's coastal city of Latakia due to a blast after a scrap dealer unknowingly triggered an old bomb. The blast tore through a 4-storey apartment building, flattening homes and trapping residents under concrete slabs and rubble. Search and rescue teams are working and pulling bodies from the rubble as desperate efforts continue to find any remaining survivors. Officials say the explosion highlights the ongoing danger of unexploded munitions scattered across Syria due to the country's prolonged civil war. The incident has left families devastated, with authorities now investigating how the explosive device ended up in the hands of a scrap dealer. Meanwhile, emergency teams remain on the ground, sifting through the wreckage in hopes of saving more lives. Myanmar's junta carried out an airstrike on a village in the centre of the country, killing at least 12 people and destroying homes and buildings. The strike hit the village of Lepandla, which is held by anti-coup fighters and lies around 60 kilometres north of the country's second biggest city of Mandalay. Myanmar's military seized power in a 2021 coup, which has plunged the country into a fractious civil war, and analysts say the embattled junta is increasingly using airstrikes to target civilians. The number of military airstrikes on civilians has risen year on year during the civil war, according to the non-profit organisation Armed Conflict Location and Event Data. To North America, and the death toll in the US tornadoes continues to rise. At least 34 people have now died in the United States, including 12 in Missouri alone, after deadly tornadoes tore through several southeastern states, flipping cars and flattening homes. In Kansas, at least 8 people died after more than 55 vehicles were involved in a car crash due to a dust storm. More than 170,000 properties were without power across 5 states, including Michigan, Missouri and Illinois. Further severe weather is expected for the region, with tornado watches issued across eastern Louisiana, western Georgia and central Tennessee, also including the western Florida panhandle. The destructive storms fueled more than 100 wildfires in several central states and overturned multiple semi-trailer trucks. The governors of Arkansas and Georgia have both declared a state of emergency, as weather is expected to grow more extreme later on to Sunday. Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee has also released funds as a disaster recovery to help injured people. The extreme weather conditions caused by the storm system moving across the country are set to affect more than 100 million people across the United States. The foreign ministers of the group of 7 countries have condemned China's aggressive maritime actions in the Indo-Pacific region, to which China has lashed out at accusations it is endangering maritime safety made by top diplomats from the group of 7 industrialized democracies in a joint statement, saying the G7 members are filled with arrogance, prejudice and malicious intentions. The joint statement by the G7 delegates also condemned the increasing use of dangerous vessel manoeuvres and water cannons, the indiscriminate attacks against commercial vessels and other maritime actions that undermine the maritime order based on the rule of law and international law. Hong Kong conglomerate CK Hutchison is facing increasing pressure from Beijing after selling its Panama Canal ports to a US-led consortium for $19 billion. The deal was made under pressure from US President Donald Trump, sparked criticism from Chinese authorities, who have now published multiple editorials condemning the move. State-backed media accuse the company of handing over strategic assets to ill-meaning American forces and warns that business leaders must choose a side. Shares of CK Hutchison plunged more than 6% in Hong Kong amid the backlash. The company has yet to respond to requests for comment, while China's foreign ministry has remained silent on the matter. Thousands of Mexicans have taken to the streets to protest after the discovery of a mass grave containing numerous unidentified bodies. The grim find has sparked outrage and grief among communities already struggling with violence and disappearances. Protesters are demanding justice for the victims and action from the government to address the ongoing crisis of mass graves across the country. Families of missing persons joined the demonstrations, holding photos of their loved ones and calling for thorough investigations. President Emmanuel Macron has vowed to increase efforts to identify the victims and hold those responsible accountable. Human rights organisations have condemned the government's slow response and lack of transparency in handling such cases. The latest discovery has fuelled public anger over the lack of security and accountability, with many calling for reforms in how authorities address violence and human rights violations. China's Baidu has introduced 2 new AI models, including Ernie X1, which it claims rivals DeepSeek's R1 at half the price. The company says X1 has advanced reasoning capabilities, while its Ernie 4.5 model features improved language, logic and memory functions. Baidu is pushing to stand out in the competitive AI sector as Chinese startups like DeepSeek challenge US tech dominance with cost-effective models. Despite launching a ChatGPT-style chatbot, Baidu has faced challenges in widespread adoption. The company emphasizes its latest AI advancements, including autonomous deep thinking and multimodal capabilities. To Europe, and hundreds have rallied in Albania's capital, Tirana, as the opposition protested a new ban targeting TikTok, arguing the move would have an impact on elections later this year. Earlier this week, Albanian authorities ordered internet providers to block relevant IP addresses and DNS servers linked to the app, implementing a ban ordered by Prime Minister Edi Rama in December. Opposition leader Sali Berisha said the ban would undercut their ability to campaign online ahead of May's parliamentary elections. Here's what the opposition party has said.
Mbyllja e TikTokut bëhet tërësisht për arsye politike, pak ditë përpara zgjedhjeve, për të dëmtuar opozitën dhe për shumë arsye të tjera që ndikojnë në biznese, censurën e fjalës, mendimin e lirë, që është tërësisht një veprim politik.
TikTok has a huge following among young people, attracted to its never-ended scroll of ultra-brief videos. It has more than 1 billion active users worldwide. But the Chinese-owned platform has been regularly hit by controversy. Meanwhile, here's what a protester in Albania has said on the TikTok ban.
Nuk e hap dot, kryeministri ka bllokuar TikTokun në Shqipëri. Mesazhi tjetër i Danielës më goditi fort. Ajo më shkruan: "Lorez, a jeton në Shqipëri apo në Korenë e Veriut?"
Moving on, and millions in Cuba remain without electricity after a widespread power grid failure left the island in darkness. The blackout, the fourth in 6 months, was attributed to a failure at a substation near Havana. This worsens an already fragile energy system amid the country's economic crisis. Authorities are prioritising power restoration for hospitals and essential services. The Cuban Electricity Union is implementing microsystems to gradually reconnect affected areas. Provinces like Guantanamo, Santiago, Las Tunas and Pinar del Rio have begun partial recovery. Internet and phone services were also disrupted, adding to frustrations. President Miguel Diaz-Canel assured citizens that crews were working intensively to stabilise the grid. A Peruvian fisherman who spent 95 days lost at sea has returned home and had an emotional reunion with his family. 61-year-old Maximo Napa Castro set off for Marcona in December for what was meant to be a short fishing trip, but a powerful storm pushed him off the course, leaving him adrift in the Pacific Ocean. With no way to call for help, he survived by drinking rainwater and eating insects, birds and even a sea turtle. In his final 15 days, he had no food at all. But after months of searching, an Ecuadorian fishing crew spotted him 680 miles off Peru's coast and brought him to safety. He was rushed to a hospital in Paita, where doctors treated him for severe dehydration. Napa says he never lost hope, drawing strength from thoughts of his mother and 2-month-old granddaughter. His family, who never stopped searching, says his survival is nothing short of a miracle. The Crew 10 mission, jointly launched by NASA and SpaceX, is heading to the International Space Station as part of the regular crew rotation and will bring back stranded US astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore. The mission is nearing its next phase, with the Crew Dragon spacecraft set for rendezvous, docking and hatch opening. Crew 10 was originally